On a crisp autumn morning in 2019, the body of Samantha Davenport was discovered in the basement of her modest suburban home, the victim of a brutal and ritualistic murder. At the center of this horrifying tale was Josh Davenport, a 48-year-old insurance adjuster whose unremarkable life belied the shocking acts he would eventually commit. To his neighbors, Josh was a quiet, somewhat awkward man who kept to himself. Few could have imagined the turmoil brewing beneath his placid exterior, or the sinister forces that would ultimately drive him to murder. Josh Davenport's journey to becoming a murderer began long before he ever logged onto the dark web. Born in 1971 to working-class parents, Josh was a shy and introverted child who struggled to form meaningful connections with his peers. His father, a stern factory worker, showed little affection and often berated Josh for his lack of athletic prowess and social skills. His mother, though loving, was overwhelmed by her own struggles with depression and was unable to provide the emotional support Josh desperately needed. Throughout his school years, Josh found solace in books and computers, excelling academically but failing to develop the social skills necessary to navigate the complexities of human relationships. He graduated high school with honors, but opted to attend the local community college, rather than venturing away from the familiar confines of his town. It was during his college years that Josh experienced his first taste of romantic connection. Samantha, a kind-hearted nursing student, saw past Josh's awkward exterior and was drawn to his intelligence and quiet sensitivity. Their relationship blossomed, and for a time Josh believed he had found the acceptance and love he had always craved. After graduation, Josh secured a job as an insurance adjuster at a local firm, while Samantha began her career as a registered nurse at a general hospital. They married in 1996, settling into a modest home not far from where Josh had grown up. For the first few years, their life together seemed idyllic, but cracks soon began to appear in their relationship. Josh's innate insecurity and fear of abandonment manifested as jealousy and possessiveness. He grew increasingly paranoid about Samantha's interactions with male colleagues and patients, often accusing her of infidelity without cause. Samantha, in turn, became frustrated with Josh's lack of emotional maturity and his inability to trust her. Their arguments grew more frequent and intense, driving a wedge between them that widened with each passing year. As he approached middle age, Josh found himself grappling with a profound sense of disappointment and failure. His career had stagnated, with younger colleagues passing him by for promotions. The dream of starting a family had long since faded, as fertility issues and the strain on their marriage made parenthood an increasingly distant possibility. By his mid-40s, Josh had become a shell of his former self. He went through the motions at work, returning home each evening to a house filled with tension and unspoken resentment. Samantha had grown distant, throwing herself into her career and volunteer work, leaving Josh to confront his loneliness and sense of inadequacy and solitude. It was in this state of desperation and vulnerability that Josh first turned to the internet as a means of escape. What began as harmless browsing of forums and chat rooms gradually led him to explore darker corners of the web, searching for anything to fill the void that had consumed his life. Little did he know that this digital journey would lead him to the doorstep of a group that would exploit his weaknesses and set him on a path to unimaginable darkness. Josh's descent into the world of the dark web began innocuously enough. Late one night, unable to sleep and desperate for some form of human connection, he found himself browsing online forums dedicated to topics ranging from conspiracy theories to the occult. These digital spaces offered Josh a sense of anonymity and acceptance he had never experienced in his day-to-day life. As he delved deeper into these online communities, Josh encountered mentions of the dark web, a hidden part of the internet accessible only through specialized software. Initially, Josh's forays into the dark web were driven by curiosity rather than malice. He marveled at the vast array of information and services available, both legal and illegal. Josh's exploration of the dark web coincided with a particularly difficult period in his marriage. Samantha had recently received a promotion at work, which only served to highlight Josh's own career stagnation. Their arguments had become more frequent and bitter, often ending with Samantha sleeping in the spare bedroom. The dark web became Josh's refuge, a place where he could escape the failures and disappointments of his real life. It was during one of his late-night browsing sessions that Josh stumbled upon a forum. The site's black background and crimson text created an aura of mystery and danger that immediately captivated Josh. As he read through the posts, he found discussions of ancient rituals, dark powers, and the promise of transformation for those deemed worthy. Something about the forum's blend of occult knowledge and promises of personal empowerment resonated deeply with Josh. Here was a group that seemed to offer the sense of purpose and belonging he had craved his entire life. Despite a faint voice of caution in the back of his mind, Josh created an account and made his first post, introducing himself as a seeker of hidden truths. The response was almost immediate. Within minutes, Josh received welcoming messages from other members, each more effusive than the last. As he basked in this sudden attention and acceptance, Josh failed to recognize the predatory nature of the interest being shown in him. He had taken his first step into a world that would ultimately consume him, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy and horror. The forum was far more than just another dark web cult. It was a carefully constructed digital ecosystem designed to identify, manipulate, and exploit vulnerable individuals like Josh Davenport. At its core, the group presented itself as a modern mystery cult, blending elements of ancient paganism, satanic imagery, and New Age spirituality into a seductive tapestry of esoteric knowledge and promised power. The forum's structure was deceptively simple at first glance. New members like Josh started in the outer circle, known as the Seekers. Here they were encouraged to share their personal struggles and desires, all under the guise of seeking spiritual guidance. More experienced members, called guides, would respond with carefully crafted messages of support and understanding, gradually introducing the group's core beliefs and practices. As seekers proved their dedication through active participation and completion of assigned spiritual exercises, they could progress to the rank of initiate. This inner circle had access to more specialized sub-forums and one-on-one mentoring sessions with higher-ranking members. It was at this level that the true nature of the cult began to reveal itself, with discussions of blood rituals, sacrificial magic, and the accumulation of dark energies. At the pinnacle of the dark forum stood the enigmatic figure known only as the Crimson Prophet. This individual, whose true identity remained a closely guarded secret, was revered by cult members as a direct conduit to ancient and powerful dark forces. The Crimson Prophet's posts were rare but always impactful, written in a cryptic style that invited multiple interpretations and sparked fierce debates among the followers. Key members of the cult played specific roles in the indoctrination and manipulation of newcomers like Josh. There was Midnight Whisper, a self-proclaimed empath who excelled at identifying and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. Darksage served as the group's lore master, weaving together mythologies and occult traditions to create a compelling narrative of secret knowledge. Shadowwalker acted as the cult's enforcer, subtly threatening those who showed signs of doubt or resistance. The beliefs propagated by the cult of the forum were a toxic blend of fatalism, elitism, and promised salvation through darkness. Members were taught that the world was inherently corrupt, and that true power could only be achieved by embracing humanity's darkest impulses. The cult preached that certain individuals, their followers, were chosen by dark forces to bring about a new age of chaos and transformation. Rituals played a central role in the cult's practices. These began as seemingly harmless meditation exercises and symbolic gestures performed in front of webcams. However, as members progressed through the ranks, the rituals became increasingly extreme, often involving self-harm, sexual degradation, and eventually, acts of violence against others. Financial exploitation was another key aspect of the cult's operations. Members were encouraged to make offerings to prove their dedication, with higher ranks requiring ever larger financial commitments. As Josh Davenport delved deeper into the cult, he remained unaware of the full scope of the organization he had joined. Josh's progression from seeker to initiate was rapid, fueled by his desperate need for acceptance and his willingness to embrace the cult's teachings. He eagerly completed each assigned task, from meditation exercises focused on channeling dark energies, to more disturbing activities like recording himself reciting blasphemous oaths in front of a makeshift altar. As Josh delved deeper into the cult's ideology, his behavior in the real world began to change noticeably. He grew more withdrawn at work, his performance slipping to the point where he received a formal warning from his supervisor. At home, the distance between him and Samantha widened into an unbridgeable chasm. When she attempted to discuss her concerns about his changed demeanor, Josh reacted with uncharacteristic anger, accusing her of trying to hold him back from his true potential. The rituals Josh performed grew increasingly extreme. What began as simple candle-lighting ceremonies evolved into bloodletting rituals, with Josh using a ceremonial dagger, provided by the cult, to make small cuts on his arms and chest. He meticulously documented these acts, sharing the images with his online mentors who praised his dedication and promised that greater power awaited him. Josh's physical appearance began to deteriorate as he neglected his health in favor of spending more time online. He lost weight. His skin took on a pallid hue and dark circles formed under his eyes from countless nights spent hunched over his computer screen. Samantha's pleas for him to seek help fell on deaf ears, as Josh convinced himself that she simply couldn't understand the profound transformation he was undergoing. As Josh progressed through the ranks of the cult, he was granted access to more exclusive areas of the forum. Here, he encountered discussions of even darker practices, including animal sacrifice and the harnessing of sexual energy for magical purposes. The turning point came when Josh was selected for a one-on-one digital audience with the Crimson Prophet. This rare honor filled Josh with a sense of pride and purpose he hadn't felt in years. As he sat before his computer, heart racing in anticipation, Josh felt that he was on the verge of unlocking the secrets of the universe. He had no way of knowing that this conversation would set in motion a series of events that would lead to tragedy and the destruction of everything he had ever known. The digital audience with the Crimson Prophet marked a critical juncture in Josh's descent into darkness. The encounter was carefully orchestrated to maximize its psychological impact, with Josh instructed to prepare his sacred space, don ceremonial robes, and engage in a preparatory ritual involving meditation and self-flagellation. "The prophet, you have been chosen," the message began. "You stand at the threshold of true power, but the path forward requires the ultimate sacrifice. Are you prepared to shed the last vestiges of your former self and embrace the darkness that will set you free?" Josh's fingers trembled as he typed his response. "I am ready, great prophet. Tell me what I must do." What followed was a masterclass in manipulation. The Crimson Prophet began by reinforcing Josh's sense of specialness and destiny. They wove a narrative that recast Josh's life struggles as tests of worthiness, positioning him as a long-awaited messiah figure within the cult's mythology. The prophet then began to probe Josh's psyche, asking pointed questions about his relationships, particularly with Samantha. Josh, his inhibitions lowered by the intoxicating atmosphere of the encounter, poured out his frustrations and resentments. He spoke of feeling emasculated by Samantha's success, of the gnawing fear that she would leave him for someone better. With each confession, the prophet offered validation and twisted guidance. "Your wife is an anchor, holding you back from your true potential," the prophet declared. "She is a servant of the light, unconsciously working to suppress your growing power. As long as she lives, you can never fully embrace your destiny." The suggestion of violence was introduced gradually, cloaked in the language of ritual and sacrifice. The prophet spoke of ancient rites that required the offering of that which the aspirant held most dear. In Josh's case, the prophet asserted, this could only mean one thing: Samantha's life. By the end of the session, Josh's mind was reeling. The prophet left him with a set of detailed instructions for a ritual that would supposedly unleash his latent powers, a ritual that would culminate in Samantha's death. Perform this rite, and you will be reborn as a living God, the prophet promised. Fail and you will be cast out, forever unworthy of the gifts that could have been yours. As the prophet's avatar faded from the screen, Josh sat in stunned silence, the full weight of what he was considering crashing down upon him. A small part of him recognized the madness of what he was contemplating, but that voice was quickly drowned out by the chorus of his own insecurities and the seductive whispers of promised power. The week leading up to the fateful night was a blur of feverish preparation and mounting tension for Josh. By day, he went through the motions of his normal life, his colleagues and even Samantha unaware of the storm raging within him. By night, he meticulously gathered the components for the ritual as specified by the Crimson Prophet. Black candles, a silver chalice, a ceremonial dagger with a bone handle, and various herbs and powders of dubious origin. As the designated date approached, Josh's mental state deteriorated rapidly. He barely slept, spending hours poring over the instructions he'd been given, memorizing the incantations and visualizing the act he was about to commit. Samantha, sensing the growing tension, made several attempts to reach out to Josh. She suggested counseling, tried to engage him in conversations about their future, and even planned a weekend getaway in a last-ditch effort to rekindle their connection. Josh rebuffed each overture, his mind already set on the grim task ahead. On the evening of October 15, 2019, Samantha Davenport returned home from her shift at the hospital, exhausted but looking forward to a quiet night with her husband. The house was dark as she entered, save for a faint flickering light emanating from the basement door. Samantha called out Josh's name, receiving no response. Concerned, she made her way down the basement stairs, unaware that she was walking into a nightmare. The scene that greeted Samantha was like something out of a horror film. The basement had been transformed into a macabre ritual space. Flat candles formed a large circle in the center of the room, their flames casting writhing shadows on the walls. Strange symbols had been painted on the floor and walls, in what looked disturbingly like blood. In the center of the circle stood Josh, clad in a black robe, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Samantha, what are you doing here?" Josh's voice was barely recognizable, a hoarse whisper that sent chills down Samantha's spine. "You weren't supposed to be home yet. It's not time." Samantha, frozen in shock and fear, struggled to comprehend the scene before her. "Josh, what is all this? What's going on?" Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before her with the husband she thought she knew. Josh's demeanor shifted, a cruel smile playing across his lips. "You're early, my dear, but perhaps this is meant to be. The Dark Lords work in mysterious ways." He gestured for Samantha to enter the circle. "Come, join me, be part of my ascension." As Samantha took a hesitant step backward, Josh lunged forward with surprising speed. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron, and dragged her into the circle. Samantha's screams were cut short as Josh clamped a hand over her mouth, forcing her to the ground. What followed was a scene of unimaginable horror. Josh, lost in the throes of his delusion, began to recite the incantations he had so carefully memorized. His voice rose and fell in an unnatural cadence as he called upon dark forces that existed only in the twisted mythology of the cult. Samantha fought desperately, but Josh's madness lent him an inhuman strength. He bound her wrists and ankles with cord, heedless of her muffled pleas and tears. As he reached for the ceremonial dagger, a fleeting look of doubt crossed his face. For a moment, the man Samantha had married seemed to resurface, horror dawning in his eyes as he realized what he was about to do. But the moment passed. Josh's features hardened once more as he raised the dagger high. "This is my sacrifice," he intoned. "With this offering, I claim my power and break the chains of my old life." The dagger plunged down, and Samantha's body jerked as the blade pierced her chest. Josh, lost in a frenzy of bloodlust and religious ecstasy, stabbed again and again. As Samantha's life ebbed away, Josh continued the ritual. He collected her blood in the silver chalice, anointed his forehead with it, and chanted the final words of the ceremony. He waited, breathless for the rush of power the Crimson Prophet had promised. Seconds ticked by, then minutes, but nothing changed. The basement remained silent, save for Josh's ragged breathing and the soft hiss of guttering candles. Slowly, terribly, reality began to assert itself. The magnitude of what he had done crashed over Josh like a tidal wave. He looked down at his blood-soaked hands, at the lifeless body of the woman he had once vowed to love and protect, and a wail of anguish tore from his throat. There was no power, no transcendence, only the stark horror of his actions. Josh collapsed beside Samantha's body, cradling her cooling form as sobs racked his body. He remained there through the night, muttering incoherent apologies and pleas for forgiveness to unhearing ears. The discovery of Samantha Davenport's body sent shockwaves through the quiet community. It was the Davenports' next-door neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Winters, who first raised the alarm. Concerned by the absence of any activity from the house, and unable to reach either Josh or Samantha by phone, she called the police to perform a wellness check. Officer Mark Ramirez, a seasoned member of the town's police department, arrived at the Davenport residence at approximately 10:30 a.m. on October 15th. His knock went unanswered, but he noticed a faint, unpleasant odor emanating from the house. Following protocol, Officer Ramirez circled the property, finding the back door unlocked. The smell intensified as he entered, leading him to the partially open basement door. What Officer Ramirez discovered in the basement would haunt him for years to come. Samantha's body lay in the center of a crude occult circle, surrounded by burned-out candles and bizarre symbols. Josh sat nearby, catatonic and covered in dried blood, still clutching his wife's lifeless hand. The crime scene investigators who arrived shortly after were confronted with a gruesome tableau that seemed more fitting for a horror movie than a suburban home. Forensic analyst Dr. Lydia Chen later remarked that in her 15 years on the job, she had never seen a crime scene so ritualistic in nature. The investigation, led by Detective Sandra Morris, quickly focused on unraveling the mystery of Josh's apparent descent into madness. A search of the Davenport home revealed a laptop in Josh's study, which proved to be a crucial piece of evidence. Cyber forensics expert Alan Tsung was brought in to analyze its contents. What Tsung discovered was disturbing. Months of forum posts and private messages documenting Josh's involvement with the cult. The sheer volume of data was staggering, painting a clear picture of Josh's gradual indoctrination and the cult's deliberate manipulation of his vulnerabilities. As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover other cases across the country with similarities to the Davenport murder. A pattern emerged of lonely middle-aged individuals being drawn into the cult and subsequently committing violent acts. Meanwhile, Josh Davenport remained in a near catatonic state, unresponsive to questioning and seemingly unaware of his surroundings. He was placed under psychiatric hold at the local mental health facility, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez took charge of his care. Initial evaluations suggested a complete mental breakdown, with Josh alternating between periods of unresponsiveness and bouts of hysterical rambling about dark lords and promised power. As the investigation progressed, the community struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. A candlelight vigil was held for Samantha, attended by tens of local residents. The breakthrough in the Davenport case came 3 months after the murder, following tireless efforts by a joint task force of local law enforcement and FBI agents. The key to unraveling the mystery lay in a series of encrypted messages recovered from Josh's laptop, which cyber forensics expert Alan Tsung finally managed to decode. These messages revealed the true extent of the cult's operations and the sophisticated methods they used to manipulate vulnerable individuals. The cult's leadership structure was exposed, with the identity of the Crimson Prophet traced to a former psychology professor. Armed with this information, investigators coordinated simultaneous raids targeting key members of the cult. Crimson Prophet was apprehended at a remote compound, where she had been living under an assumed identity. Josh Davenport finally emerged from his catatonic state. In a series of emotionally charged sessions with Dr. Rodriguez, he began to recount the events leading up to Samantha's murder. Josh's confession, filled with remorse and horror at his own actions, provided crucial details that helped prosecutors build their case against the cult leaders. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological tactics employed by the cult, while former members provided chilling accounts of their experiences. Josh Davenport, deemed mentally unfit to stand trial, was committed to a high-security psychiatric facility. His case became a focal point for discussions about criminal responsibility and the nature of culpability in cases of extreme manipulation. In the aftermath of the trial, lawmakers pushed for new legislation to combat online radicalization and protect vulnerable individuals from predatory groups. For the community, the resolution of the case brought a measure of closure, but the scars left by the tragedy ran deep. The Davenport house, once a crime scene and now a painful reminder, was eventually demolished. In its place, the community erected a small memorial garden dedicated to Samantha and other victims of the cult.